It's a delight to meet you.
Thank you. It's been pretty lively out here so far.
I enjoy the film is an interesting film because I was talking to Chris there about grief, and it's about grief, isn't it? The film.
But I'm glad you said it's a comedy.
It is a comedy. No, that's right.
Yeah.
It's about a family coping with grief.
Well,
That's
desperation is pretty funny.
And you lose your husband.
Yes,
and
unexpectedly.
Unexpectedly. He's away back home in Kentucky, wherever it is, where he came from, and you send your son, Orlando Bloom, out to actually make all the necessary arrangements.
I think that the film spans about a week or so, and so my grief, I decide to just deal with my grief in a kind of all forward motion is a good thing, and so I decide that I will do the things that I have been putting on hold, waiting for my life to start, which are to learn to cook organically, tap dance, and be funny. And so with a vengeance, I start to learn to do these things kind of badly. And I guess the moral of the story is don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, even if it is a big bear, right?
Let's have a look at the film we've been talking about. Okay. We're going to see two sequences from it. The first sequence is when you stand up to address this hostile audience.
Yeah.
You're the woman who took the boy away. You're the woman they don't want to see. And you start telling them about how you coped with your grief. Have a look at this.
He put his arms around me, he cradled me, and his embrace tightened. Finally, here was somebody who truly cared. And then I felt something else.
Yeah, I have to say she's not exactly appropriate, but she's very brave. And, you know, at the beginning of this scene, I think somewhere she understands that in order for her to move forward and for them to move forward, that she has to go down to this place that's never accepted her in Kentucky. And
there's a big noisy family. It's a bit like there's a big noisy family that you grew up in too, because you're one
I'm
of
the
9
oldest
children.
of 9.
Of 9 children.
Yeah. Wow is right.
And you're the eldest, so you'd be, I suppose, the unofficial mum, would you be?
I was the unofficial, yeah. And you know, the chaos and the lack of privacy and all the noise was very good training for this business. And also I think that it kind of grounded me in a way, because I tended not to be very practical. And
you had no ambition at that time to be an actor at all?
No, I never had an ambition to be an actor. What happened was that I had an ambition to go to school, to get away from my family, to learn.
To leave New Jersey.
To leave New Jersey, and I went to a university, and there I met a graduate student, Chris Sarandon, who's still working, whose name I eventually took. And he auditioned for someone, and he needed someone to read with him. And they saw me, and then they said, well, why don't you come back in the fall when he comes back? And so I went, this is a terrible story for everyone who's in drama school, because I then went to an audition and was cast on the spot in my first film, which became a huge hit. And then I just thought it was all so funny that I just kept getting every job. And after about 10 years, I thought, well, I guess that's what I do. And then I took it a little more seriously, but not much. And so it just goes to show you that, you know, anyone can be an actor.
Oh, the thing about the struggle, it doesn't matter, and all that drama school and all that bit.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that worries me sometimes about studying under some of these people is that they take from you exactly what you need, which is your individuality and your voice, and everyone comes out kind of the same. And so, or else they're very bitter people, and they're angry, and they take it out, you know, in a very masochistic way. So I always say, you know, if you know what you want to do, try to get as much experience as possible. Go to acting school if that helps. Make sure that you don't lose what made Dustin Hoffman. I mean, there are places that would have told him that he couldn't possibly fit the mold. And I think of myself as a character actor, and that's probably why I've lasted so long.
But when you started off, of course, you were very much cast as a glamour girl, weren't you?
Well, I was cast as an ingenue, definitely, but different kinds. Usually when they couldn't figure out who to cast, I got a foot in the door. And even with Bull Durham, they didn't want me. They had gone through the list, and other people wouldn't read, and I just swallowed my pride and read, because I knew that was a great script. And so all along the way, I've kind of been discovered about 3 or 4 times in different kinds of milieus, you know.
How did that Catholic girl, how did she overcome the business about being nude in movies and doing the sex scenes and that sort of thing?
You know, I was told I had an overabundance of original sin way back. And so that kind of, I never could understand a lot of the basic, you know, it's just that wrathful God thing and all the suffering and everything. So I was kind of outside praying like crazy to fit in, but I never did. And most of the nudity that I've done, I mean, it's kind of awkward to get in a bathtub with your clothes on or to be a hooker and not see a breast. So, you know, if there's a scene that really says something about the character or progresses the plot, then a director deals with it as a scene. If it's just a kind of generalized take off your clothes, then I really can't do it because I get too self-conscious. And my kids, you know, they really haven't been interested in seeing any of my films, except the ones they're in, and then they fast forward to wherever they are in the film.
But have you ever had one of their friends say, when your kids' friends come to you and say, were you in that movie where you...
No, they say to my kids, your mom's hot. And they're so embarrassed. Or else one of my kids, when he was really little, came home and said, did you play a lesbian vampire? I said, are you crazy? No. And then I went, oh my God, I did. I did. I guess you could see it that way, you know. And my daughter's working now, and she had a... she was offered a job, and there was some nudity in it, and she decided she wanted to do that. And she didn't mention, then we started talking about putting clauses in. I said, well, what about a nudity clause? She said, that's a low-budget film. I'm not taking my clothes off for a low-budget film. And I thought, my God, she's far more ahead than I was. Yeah, you know, I wouldn't have thought that way at all. But she was okay with nudity, but she wasn't going to do it for nothing, you know. And I thought, well, that's a more modern take on the whole deal.
Yeah, because again, when you read the cuttings about you, I mean, Playboy been pursuing you for 15 years or more, 20 years. Or...
But you know, kids don't think that you existed before they did. So anything to do with sex, even their coming into being, even, you know, sex with their father, they don't want to think that it happened. Yes. So they consider sex even, you know, when Alfie came out with Jude, you know, and there's no real sex in that. But even kissing, they're like, oh my God, do you have more sex in this one too? You know? And I said, no, we just kissed. Oh, well, oh, yeah, oh. And when they saw my tribute at Lincoln Center, I kind of forced them to go, because they, for the longest time, just thought I worked in a trailer. You know, they were showing, I sat there and I suddenly realized, oh my God, you know, they're going to show film clips that had never entered my mind. And it was a really big deal. And I thought, well, it'll be tasteful. But there's a little bit of sex. And every time I looked over, I think my one son was like 12 and the other one was 11, 10 or something. And I'd look over and my older one would be going, and the little one would just be laughing. And so at the end, I said, well, what did you think? And the older one said, you know, did it never occur to you that you might have children? And the younger one, I said, well, what did you think, Miles? And he said, it was great, Mom, but scarring.
Let's go back to talking about the film, because you mentioned earlier on, we saw the sequence there where you talked to the audience about how you kind of dealt with your grief, and then you said that in the end you danced this tribute to your husband. You said you learned how to tap dance, and you danced. It's a very moving and effective scene. Let's have a look at this now. Here we go. You know, I think that is actually going to be, that entire sequence is going to be one of those classic scenes, you know, in movies.
Well, when I read it, I knew that it was definitely important for the film, but the tone of it is very fragile, so I was very frightened when I did it, which was fine since she was very frightened when she did it.
Of course.
But,
it's interesting, too, as you mentioned when we were watching that, I mean, trying to tap dance to a waltz.
It's impossible. It's a crazy idea to begin with. I know.
It's a wonderful idea because it actually goes back to what you're talking about. It's actually quite wrong, but in fact it works because it's wrong.
But you know, I remembered at a friend's funeral in the early days of AIDS, a dear close friend of mine died, and he'd planned a fabulous memorial service, and at the end of it, he had the Nylons, which is an a cappella group. I mean, didn't have them, but on a recording, singing up on the roof. And it's a really rousing, and I so wanted to get up and dance, and no one else was moving. And I was too afraid to do it, you know. And I thought of the courage that it takes, because we have kind of preconceived notions of how you have to grieve and how you have to celebrate and what you have to do. And sometimes the people that you're honoring or the people that you're remembering wouldn't necessarily want it to be somber, you know. They
It's interesting, when you go to memorial services, people stand up and make good speeches. I want to stand up and cheer sometimes. But here, sometimes you get a slight embarrassed patter of applause. But
Or how about the people that use this service to get up and talk about themselves?
Now that's...
I want to kill them.
They should boo
Right
them.
on the spot. They should get a hook.
But I think we should regard them as being celebrations and therefore celebrate, don't you?
Yeah.
And
I'd
cheer
want
if
that.
you.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. Also, too, in the film, too, there's a hint, too, in your performance about growing old disgracefully as well. Is that what you intend to do? I mean, will you wear purple and large hats and sort of carry a flower basket wherever you go and become...
I'm sure it'll be somewhat eccentric, you know. I think the only reason I've gotten away with as much as I have so far is because I just hadn't been informed of the rules. So everyone always asks me, all the journalists, well, how did you manage to get past 40 and still be working? And honestly, it was like ignorance is bliss. I didn't know there was supposed to be a rule about not playing mothers, not doing this, and I just kept going, never imagining that, you know, I suddenly had to change who I was or anything. And so I guess that'll continue.
Would you consider enhancing that career, if you like, by surgery and that sort of thing?
Well, you know, I'm not going to say no, but I hate that look that people get, that kind of burn victim, terrified look that people get when they're... In fact, the next movie that I'm doing, she's had a lot of plastic surgery, and so we're going to pull everything to that state where you look like, you know, you're shocked and kind of... So I don't know. I can't imagine that I'll like it so much that I'll do it. I could see, you know, wanting to save a little bit here and there, but I don't want to look like a female impersonator version of myself, which is kind of, I think, what happens. And I figure, too, that I'll probably be the only one that can actually play 65, because no one else will look that way. So I'll have a corner on the market, you know.
Well, you're, what, 59 now?
I'm 59 now, yeah. I just had a birthday a few days ago.
You're the same age, though, too. But it doesn't joke. Well, for the moment, thank you for joining me. The film's called Elizabethtown.
Thank you for having
It's worth going just for your performance alone, I have to say that.
Thank
Susan
you.
Sarandon.